Hey, what's going on, y'all? In today's video, I'm going to be doing a painting process and talking a bit more about fundamentals and a bit about what it is that I'm doing and why I'm choosing to do it. So I'm hoping this video is a bit more educational. So I'm going to be painting an environment scene here, and I'm going to try to get some storytelling into it. Maybe just some simple storytelling, but we'll see what I can do with that. The canvas size, I'm using a 3000 by a 3800 pixel canvas, and the color profile is an sRGB, just a standard sRGB, as you can see there. I'm using Procreate on the iPad Pro to do this, and I'll be using some variety of brushes, some of which are going to be from a free brush pack that I have on my Patreon page. If you want some free brushes, the link is available in the description of this video. So with that said, I'll get into it and I'll just talk a bit about what I'm doing here. This is live, so I'm painting as I talk, so bear with me if I get distracted. I am painting while I'm speaking, so and this video will probably be a bit longer here, but hopefully it is more of an educational video. So I'm just getting in a sky using an airbrush to do this. Just getting in kind of a gradient here for the sky. I usually do this. It doesn't matter too much which brush, whether it be an airbrush or if I want to get some texture in here, I can use any type of brush really. But I usually start with the sky just so I get some colors down on the canvas that I can play with. And once we get that in, it doesn't have to be perfect. We can always adjust it later. I'm going to get in a drawing guide now. So in Procreate, there's a setting called the drawing guide, and you can turn it on and then turn on the perspective. And if you tap on the screen, it brings in a vanishing point, which is this blue dot right here. And so we can use the vanishing point along with the horizon line, which is the horizontal blue line. And we can use these to really set up a perspective grid. So I'll have a 1-point perspective. I shouldn't need to do a 2-point or 3-point. Perspective can get tricky or difficult once you start to get more complicated with it and start to add more points, more vanishing points. So a 1-point perspective here is just this 1 point. But if we add a second one, this would be a 2-point perspective. You can see I added a second one here. And a third one up here would be like a 3-point perspective. I wouldn't usually use a 3-point perspective unless I'm adding in buildings or doing like a cityscape. So yeah, we're not going to use a 3-point perspective here, but usually I just use a 2 or a 1-point perspective if we're doing an environment with no buildings or no structures. So I'm just getting in some foreground grass here, just painting in a local color with the green. And when I paint this green in, I don't really care too much what exact color it is. I'm just getting a local green color. I'm going to add more lighting and shadow to it later, so it's going to look pretty different than how it looks now, but I'm really just focused on getting this shape in right here. And from here, maybe I can get some trees back here. You can see how I work with my layers. I won't talk too much about that, but I do like to keep my things on separate layers. Some people may like to keep their stuff all on one layer, all on 2 or 3 layers, but I like to have a few layers just to keep everything clean and separate. But I don't like to do like so many layers to where it starts to get overwhelming or too confusing, because that can happen. All right, so I'm just getting in some trees back here, and you can see these trees are actually like blue. Look, I'm using a blue color for the trees, and that's because of atmospheric perspective. So the further back in a scene that we get, the more atmosphere will get in the way of the viewer and the object. So in this case, these trees are going to be a bit further back here. Maybe I can shrink them down a little bit to make them even smaller. But yeah, so these trees are further back in the scene, meaning that the blue sky, the atmosphere, will be able to affect the overall color of the tree more and have them appear to be more of a blue color rather than, I'd assume these trees are normally more of a green color, so, but they look more blue, and that's pretty much all there is to that. And if we want to make trees even further back, you can see I'm going to make some more right here. I'm going to want to pull this more into the blues and have it maybe a little bit lighter and maybe a little bit less saturated, and we can paint some more trees back there. I'll switch brushes just so I have more of a variety. of texture here. But yeah, see, now these trees feel like they're further back. And we can do more things to push them back even further. We could add some fog in front of them or some atmosphere. Maybe I'll make them even more lighter. Something like that should be good. And maybe I'll make these lighter too. I'll adjust colors quite frequently. So colors aren't something that, especially since we're working on digital, you don't need to be exact right when you get the color down, or the first color that you put down doesn't need to be perfect, the first value that you get down, because you can always change them with the sliders. You can always paint over them too if you want to just simply paint over it. All right, so I'm gonna get some more trees. So we have this kind of background going on here with these trees that are feeling kind of washed out, and they're trees that are further in the back of the scene. So I'm going to start to work on some elements closer to us. So maybe we can get in some darker elements closer to us. So maybe a tree, let's say maybe a tree right here we can get in. So like I mentioned, with these trees, if I sample this color, this is like a blue color. But I'm going to paint a tree that's closer to us now. So the local color of these trees are going to be green. So we want it to be closer to the local color, the real color of the tree. Again, the local color is just the color of something under normal lighting conditions. So without any atmospheric perspective, without any fog, without any different type of light source, like for example, a blue light or a red light bulb shining on something, none of that, just under normal white lighting conditions. So I will get in a tree right here. So it's more of a green and it's also darker. So usually things are also darker as they get closer to the viewer. So we can just getting in a shape here. I'm going to refine the shape a little bit, and sometimes it takes a little bit to just figure out the shape. Maybe I'll switch brushes as well. I like to switch brushes from time to time if I feel like things are starting to get too repetitive. Sometimes switching brushes can be a good way to see different things, right? To kind of look at your painting in a new way and just get some new textures on the canvas can kind of change things up. So. And just making sure that the shape looks how I want it to. So I'm thinking about composition right now and trying to set up this scene. But I'm thinking maybe we could have a character somewhere in this area and then maybe have like a house back here somewhere. And the character is kind of going back to their house or traveling somewhere to a random house in this scene. So brushes are nice. They can do a lot of cool things, but really, if you want to learn how to paint or if you want to learn how to draw a certain way, brushes can only get you so far at the end of the day. And a lot of times it can feel like, oh, you just need the perfect brush. If only you had this brush that this artist was using, you'd be able to do this. But it's tempting to feel that way, and I know because I've felt that before. But the truth is, a lot of it just comes down to the fundamentals and about learning how to think about your art, learning how to think about what it is that you're painting, rather than kind of trying to find a brush that will do it for you, because there's no real brush that's going to do that. You have to go on that journey and experiment for yourself and just find something that works for you. And I'm not trying to say that brushes aren't at all important, because, of course, having a nice brush can really make things easier for you. But they're not as much as I think some may make them out to be. Maybe we can get in a tree right here on this right side. This tree could probably be even closer to us, so it's darker than these trees. I'm just kind of blocking in the shape right here. Just keeping this as one color as of now, one value and one color. Trying to get in the overall silhouette, and I talk a lot about that in my videos, but I think that is very important to focus on, is the silhouette and the shape, the general shape of what it is that we're trying to make. Because a good silhouette, if you can get a good silhouette that reads well, you can often get a clean, readable composition. But if you have a silhouette that is hard to read, like if what I'm painting doesn't feel like a tree or look like tree leaves, it doesn't matter how much you detail it, because it may still feel like it's not a tree. So hopefully this style of video is helpful for y'all. it again is more focused on the theory behind what I'm doing, and more focused on why I'm doing what I'm doing and what I'm thinking of, rather than just telling you what to do, as I mentioned before. So maybe I'll get in some bushes down here below this big tree. It's important to be able to teach not only what to do, but how to think, or at least give you a different perspective on how to think, rather than just telling you what to do. And I think there's a big difference between those two things. And I think if I just sit here and say, do this, do that, and do this, and then boom, you have a painting that works, you won't always know why what you did worked, and therefore you're not really learning. So that's just something that I try to keep in mind. Maybe we can get in some water here, so I'll just use a selection tool, which will give me a clean shape right here to maybe get some water in here. Something like this. And I'll just sample the sky color and paint it in. It's just a placeholder. We'll probably refine this later, get maybe a reflection in here later. All right, so let's see. We don't have any lighting in this scene. It's very flat right now, and I'm cool with that. I'm cool with that right now, but usually I don't start adding in lighting until later because, again, we just want to get into silhouettes and all that. But maybe I'll cut some of this tree out right here just so I can kind of distinguish that there's leaves and find some of this shape. I think this tree on the right side, this one right here, or this whole like big mass of darker value right here on this right side of the screen, I think this creates a nice framing element on this right side, which kind of keeps the viewer's eyes within this area, right along this area. And maybe we could get some clouds up here to also kind of lead the viewer's eyes down back into the scene. That's something that I'll think about as I start to get more elements in. But you can see I'm trying to think of these things early on, and just see how this is building up with the composition, because the composition is how things are laid out in a scene, and is how the framing and flow and the structure of everything, all the elements and the shapes. So it's one of those things that I don't want to have to change later on. I don't want to have to go in and rearrange everything later on, because that's going to be a mess if I try to do that. So yeah, maybe I can get some more grass in here, some more form onto this grass, and some darker values in here as well. So values are really what's important when it comes to working with color. So if you have values that read well, and for those who don't know, a value is just brightness, right? So this slider right here, how dark or how light something is, that's its value, right? So a lower value would be a darker color, and a higher value would be a lighter color. And so using values or levels of brightness is really what matters when it comes to working with color. Here's a trick on if you're using Procreate or Photoshop. I'm not sure of any other softwares that this works on, but if you make a new layer above everything else that you've made, and you set that layer's blend mode to saturation, and you get a gray color, doesn't matter if it's white or black or gray, any completely desaturated color, and you drop it on a canvas, this gives you a grayscale version of your canvas. So sometimes, and now you can turn that layer on and off to see what it looks like. And this is really good for seeing how your values are starting to be built up. For example, if I'm working on a painting and I want to see how do the values look, how does the levels of contrast look and all that, I can just turn this layer on, check it, make sure that everything looks good, and then we can turn it off. So I use that often. If I'm having a hard time with the values, I'll turn that layer on, and it's a good way to see your painting in a different way. If your painting can read in this form, in a value form, then it will most likely read with colors. Now, of course, you can get a little wild with the colors, and If you have a painting that's really saturated and really colorful, you know, of course that can be maybe a little noisy to look at in terms of the colors. All right, maybe I'll get some lighting on this scene now. So I'm going to sample this color that I have here, just this kind of local color green. I'm going to push it warmer. Since this is sunlight, we want it to be warmer, more of the yellow greens rather than this mid-tone green that I had. So this was a local color that I painted down. Make sure we start with that, and then I'm going to push it to the left on this hue slider right here into the yellows. And then I'll make it more saturated and a little lighter as well. And then we can paint in with that. And now you can see it already feels like there's sunlight hitting this. And we can add some saturation to it if we need to in some areas. But we're just building this up slowly. So I'm thinking there could be sunlight coming from this direction, right? So coming from the right side of the screen, coming down across towards the left side of the screen. That is the lighting scenario that I want. And so yeah, that means that would mean that these right side of these trees is going to be lit. Maybe the back side of this tree right here will be lit, some of these areas, right? And some of these trees back here may get some lighting as well, right? So something like that. That's the general idea that I'm trying to follow here for this painting. Maybe I can erase some of these, the bottom of these trees here, to push them back a little bit further. I won't go too much into perspective in this video because it's one of those things that would take a whole video for me to explain. I know I talked a little bit about the grids earlier and about how I set those up, but I know that probably doesn't really help if you don't know much about perspective. So I'll definitely have to make a video on perspective and how to implement that in an environment scene. It's one thing to use perspective on like boxes, you know, if I'm sure you've seen, like maybe you haven't, but there's often a practice that is like drawing boxes in perspective, and that's cool and all, and that's a good practice for sure. But it's definitely one thing to go from that and then to actually incorporate perspective in an environment scene. Is two different things, I think. So, I mean, the theory is the same, of course, but if you can draw boxes in perspective, you should be able to get the hang of this. But it is kind of an adjustment of how you think of it and how you see things. But if you are looking for practice and stuff, I'd say practice drawing boxes in perspective, practice setting up perspective grids, and try to draw a whole scene out of boxes. Like, that's a thing you can try to do. You can just replace this tree right here. You could, like, for example, let me try to showcase this. You could replace this tree right here for like a box, something like this. All right, and then this could be the side getting hit by the light, so maybe like this. And then this back side could be, again, like the shadow side, like this. All right, and now that tree is basically just a box in perspective now. And you can do the same with all of it. So you could just create a scene using boxes. And it could be line art if you want to. You could use just different values as well. But yeah, I, again, don't want to get too much into that. I know I'm starting to explain perspective here, but let me get back on track here. So I'm just painting in some ambient occlusion down at the bottom. That's something I'll have to talk about in a lighting video, maybe, what ambient occlusion is. It's basically just the darkest part of the shadow where no light hits. So if you think kind of like, if you could think of like under a sphere, if you think of a sphere sitting on a table, if you think right under that sphere, kind of where the sphere meets the table, that would be the ambient occlusion. And so no lighting, no ambient lighting, no direct lighting will be hitting that spot. And so that's kind of what this is on the grass, just the darkest part down here. You can get some more shadowed areas in the front. We want the foreground to be darker than the rest. I'm thinking maybe there's some trees off scene over here, which will create some shadows, some cast shadows onto this grass. All right. Thinking I can push these trees back here more, this layer here. So to do that, I'm not going to like resize them or anything. I'm just going to make them a little lighter and a little more saturated with blue. So this is before, and now this is after. They feel like they're just pushed back a little bit more, and I'm just using atmosphere to do that. So you don't always have to resize something to make it feel like it's further back in the scene. You can use atmospheric perspective, as I talked about earlier. I'll get some more bushes down here. Sometimes I'll bring down the opacity of the brush if I want to get just a light wash without having it be an opaque color. And that's something that can be helpful if you want to kind of get this transition color without it being too dark, but you also don't want it to be too light. You just don't want a solid color. But I mostly keep my brushes fully opaque and then just rely on pressure opacity rather than trying to adjust the setting every time I make a paint stroke. All right, it's kind of messy right now. The grass is a little messy. So I'm gonna want to clean that up eventually. Let's get some more grass in here. Just use a grass brush. There's so many different grass brushes out there. I have a lot here, as you can see. Just get some grass in here. All right, I think I'll make a new layer above this water layer so that I can paint over the water and have some of this grass kind of come up like this so that we are able to see this grass above the water. Yeah, I think that's better. Kind of darken this area. Remember, we have these shadows being cast from this tree right here on the right side. And so you can see that the grass in the area of shadow is a lot cooler. If I sample it, you can see right here on the slider too. So the cooler colors will be in this area. And well, color temperature is relative, but so just to keep it simple, cooler colors are like in the blues, warmer colors are in the reds and the oranges. So if I sample the shadow color, it's this right here, this green, kind of neutral mid-tone green. And if I sample this lighting color here, you can see that the color slider shifts towards the warmer colors. My point with that is that the shadow side is much cooler. And that's because there is no warm lighting hitting it. And the skylight, which is blue, the sky is a very cool light source, fills in the shadow with those cool colors, with those cooler blues. So it influences the shadows to look more of a blue tone. If it's a cloudy day or an overcast day, the shadows actually won't be blue. They won't have that influence of the sky because the sky is not out. I'm trying to group things a little bit better here. So grouping is like this. A very simplified thing of grouping is, see, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 values here, maybe 6 with this darker one. Now grouping is taking all of those, and see, now I'm just painting over with this value here, painting over all of that to create now 1, 2, 3 values. So I'm simplifying the values and I'm grouping that whole area to be this one solid value right here. And that will help keep things clean, keep things readable, and keep my painting from being too muddy or too messy. All right, let me cut back on some of this water right here. I think I want to refine that shape. All right, this isn't looking bad. This is looking all right. There's still a lot I need to do. There's still much that I need to clean up and refine. But as of now, I don't think this is too bad. I'm thinking I can get a tree on this left side right here, except I wanted to be in front of these two right here. So I'll get a warmer color. We'll have some sunlight hitting this tree, and I'm just going to paint in maybe along this one a little bit. Paint in a lighter green, maybe lighter than that, and warmer than that as well. If you have trouble with color, one of the best things that I could say right now would be to do studies. Look at reference images, whether it be from Pinterest or Google or really any image, whether you take the image yourself, whatever. Do studies of images that have nice lighting and nice colors. And don't use the color picker. You can use the color picker to kind of reference to see like maybe how far you were off, but I would really just recommend staying away from the color picker, which is this eyedropper tool, this this thing that picks up the colors here. I use it only on my own paintings, so I'm not like sampling from a reference to make this painting. And I did that for a while, but I realized that it was just, when I was early on and beginning with painting and all that, at a certain point I realized that it was more of something that was holding me back, something that was kind of doing the work for me, and I wasn't really learning how to see color with my own eyes. I was just relying on a tool rather than learning how to use my own senses to use color. So I would say just drop the color tool, the color picker tool rather, the eyedropper tool, and try to start eyeballing it for yourself. And you may be like quite off when you start. The colors may look quite different than what you want them to. But if you do it for long enough, and if you do enough studies, and if you keep on evaluating your work after you make it, eventually you'll start to get more of an eye for color. And that's something just like any skill has to develop. You have to give it the time, and you have to practice that. But if you keep using the color picker tool, that's not really going to help. And there's nothing wrong with the color picker tool, like especially if you know color theory and if you know how to look for color and all that. But if you don't and you're just relying on the color picker tool, then it's most likely not helping you in terms of being able to see things for yourself. At least that's how it was for me. And it just took many, many studies and many hours of looking at reference and many paintings that didn't look great for me to finally start to understand color. And of course, I'm still learning how to use color. I'm not the greatest by any means, I'm still trying to figure out how to use color nicely in my paintings, of course. But yeah, that's just something that's helped me out. All right, so I don't want to get too detailed with this tree right here. I feel like I was kind of starting to do that. Let me take some of this out, kind of group some of these shapes here into just shadow. Getting too detailed with it, maybe I was distracted. You can see I just grouped this whole area. I had all those different values in there, and now it's just all shadow. And that is what I mean by grouping. Whenever I say grouping, see before, and we just group all of that after, and there's just less noise right there, less detail. All right, I'm gonna make a clipping mask on this tree here, and I'm gonna get an airbrush, just softly brush in this right side with a warmer yellow-green to indicate some lighting hitting on the right side. Just gotta be careful I don't do too much of that. If I do, I can turn down the opacity here. And I think on the back side, I'll make it darker. So I'll just sample this dark color here, make it a little darker, just paint this in here. All right. Definitely probably want to get some more texture on that later, but I think for now it's all right. Get some form onto these bushes. Maybe I'll use a different brush, texture brush maybe. I don't know. Sometimes I just play around with textures and different brushes and see what works, see what I like in the moment. I have certain brushes that I like to use and I go back to often, but sometimes I just try something unique out, try something different. So I know I want some storytelling in here, and I'm trying to frame this like I mentioned earlier. I'm thinking I want a character somewhere in this area, kind of in this bottom left third of the canvas here. And I'm thinking of having maybe a house back here, almost where the vanishing point is, maybe a little to the left. Yeah, maybe we can try to get that in now. So I'll use the selection tool to get in the house, and something maybe like this should be good. Something like this, and I'll just fill in this shape that I've just made with a color. Maybe like that. Maybe I can squash it down, make it a little shorter. I think the horizon line's a little too tall right now, so maybe I can shift that down. So this horizon line, the blue level, the blue horizontal line is eye level. So that's where the level of the viewer's eye would be. And so when I say the viewer, I mean the person viewing this scene. So it would be you and I, right? So you and I, the person, if you're looking at a reference image, it'd be the person who took the photo. So that would be eye level. So we'd be about that tall, I guess. Maybe a little lower than that. Doesn't matter that much. And I'll get another shape in for this roof just to have some lighting hitting this roof and to pop this silhouette out more. So maybe something like this. Using the selection tool just to have a really graphic, clean shape here. And maybe we'll get that shape in on this side as well. Let's see how that looks. It's all right. It's not bad. Maybe I'll cut some of the sides off. I'm just working with this shape, trying to figure out what looks good. All right, we'll leave it at that for now. I don't think it's that important right now. Okay, let's work on this tree on the right side, some of this one here. I'm gonna get some more of this tree branches and these, this tree trunk in here, have that more readable. And I do want to cut into some of these leaves that I've made just so that we have some areas that we can see through, some areas that are not as opaque. I gotta be careful when doing this because the more of this that I add to the tree, the more detail that I'm adding. And if I'm not careful, it will start to get noisy. Maybe I'll cut into the bottom of it, like right here. I don't know, some stylization. All right, on these bushes right here, I will use a clipping mask and get some more lighting along the right edges, the right sides. Because again, the lighting is coming from the right side of the canvas. So we want to showcase that here. Maybe we'll have a cooler green for the ambient light hitting these top planes of these bushes. So I'm thinking of these objects as three-dimensional objects. I'm trying to think of them. At first, I'm thinking of them as just shapes, but now I'm starting to think of them as three-dimensional objects in an environment, right? So they have planes. So each object has a top plane, they've got side planes, kind of like a box. And that will help figure out where this, that will help you figure out where this lighting is going to hit. Now, organic objects like trees and bushes are a little harder to simplify into planes, but I still can use the kind of a top plane and a bottom plane to help me out with these shapes here. And by all means, feel free to paint along if you want to follow what I'm doing. I have no issue with that. In fact, that's encouraged if you want to. I'm just not doing as much of a step-by-step in this video as much as I am doing a kind of a talk while I paint, right? Going over some fundamentals and, going over, of course, some steps along the way of what I'm doing. So just want this to be more educational, more of kind of a look at how I do things and teaching you why these things work and why that I do these things, rather than just teaching you what to do, rather than just teaching you like what button to press, that I feel like only goes so far. All right. So yeah, like I said earlier, this water is a placeholder right now. So it's just a blue color for the water layer. And I don't want it to be like that forever. But often I'll just do that in the beginning so that I have something there and I know that this is where the water is going to be. And when the time comes, then I will add some more texture to it and some reflection to it as well. You'll see that I'll flip my canvas often. That is a good way to see the canvas in a new perspective, in a new way. And a lot of times, if you do that, you'll see things that may stand out that maybe they don't look that good, maybe some areas of the painting that need more work, areas that you may not have seen if you would have just kept looking at it normally. So, because we can kind of get numb to our own mistakes if we're looking at something for so long. So it's a quick thing to do, just flip the canvas and see how things are coming together. All right, so yeah, so I'm thinking some pockets right here on this grass could have like some light shining through. So if you think about it, yeah, these are cast shadows right here, but some of these areas of the tree have little pockets that are allowing light to come through. So some of these areas on the grass are going to be hit by some lighting. And what I'll do now is I'll make a new layer above everything here except for this value layer. So, and I'll select a thylacine brush, which is just a rake-like textured brush. And this is a good way for me to get in some grass textures, some grass shapes, some more texture onto the painting in general. And just use this in some areas to build up, again, just some more texture. So we can probably get some more saturation in this foreground. So yeah, it's just a stylistic thing. It's not for everybody, I'm sure, but it is something that I think is good to, for me, I just like to get these textures in here. All right, and I'll erase some out. If I do too much, I can just erase some of that. All right, let's see. What else should I add here? All right, I'll actually go above layer 14 here, and I'm gonna add more texture, or like maybe some small bushes right here, just to have some more form on this grass so that it's not just a flat plane for everywhere on the grass. And I'll do the same thing down here at the bottom right. Add in some more form right here, some more texture. Trying to build up some of this grass, make it feel a little bit bigger. So yeah, the foreground, we really want these elements to be bigger because they're much closer to the viewer. One thing, if you're having trouble having your paintings feel three-dimensional or feel like they have perspective in them, it may be because your foreground feels just as flat as your midground. So like the further back in the scene that we get, the less detail that we should see, and the smaller that thing should be. So ideally, if you're painting grass back here, it should be like maybe this big, like maybe a grass blade like this, right? And if you're painting it closer to the scene, it needs to be a lot bigger than that. So maybe something like this big, right? So you can see there's a big difference between size between the two areas, and that will definitely flatten out your paintings if you're using the same brush size to paint different areas or different depths of the canvas. So try to vary the brush size. Smaller things should be further back in the scene, and bigger things should be closer to the viewer for the most part. And you can see my layers are starting to, well, they're not too complicated. I try to keep things pretty simple, but I thought they were a little more complicated than that. I don't want my layers to get too out of hand, because they will if I don't pay attention to them. And maybe it's one of those things that is also just a preference thing. So some people may like to have a lot of layers. Like I mentioned earlier, some people may like to just paint on one or two layers. So that is completely up to you. I don't think there's any right or wrong. I think they both have benefits, and they both have pros and cons. Eventually, I'm going to get some lighting, more of stronger lighting in here. So using an overlay tool, and I'll show you how to do that later on, closer to the end of this painting. But for now, I'm not going to worry too much about the effects. It's one of those things that's like a special effect kind of thing. So I won't do that now, because I just like to save them for the later parts of the painting. All right, let's get some more texture on this tree right here, this one. I like the shape, so I'm just going to use a clipping mask so I don't mess up that shape that I have. But I just want a little bit more texture and lighting on some of this tree without breaking that shape. So maybe something like this, get some smaller details in there. Don't want to get too carried away with it either. It's an important part, but it's not a focal point, so I don't want to do too much detail with it. And if you start to add too much detail on areas that aren't the focal points, then you may start to draw the viewer's attention to those areas. So if I start adding like a ton of detail right here in this corner, like a lot of grass blades and all that, like the eye will be attracted to this area in a corner here. And we don't want that. We want the eye to go to this house, and I think I'll add a character in here as well, somewhere around this area. That's where we want the viewer to look at. And that's going to help push the storytelling. Like I mentioned, maybe this character is coming back to their house. Maybe they're just exploring this forest and they see this clearing where this house is located, and they're going to explore what's up with the house. So we want that to be the clearest thing. We don't want to have the viewer looking at like down here. That wouldn't make sense. And you can control that by using values, but also just with your level of detailing, like I said. Maybe I could take some more of this detail out up here. Just a little bit. Just filling this in with a darker color here. Or just grouping these shapes a little bit more. And everything I'm doing here should be able to be done in most other painting softwares, at least for sure in Photoshop. And I'm not too familiar with other painting softwares. I usually just use Photoshop and Procreate. So I'd say most other ones, if they have the tools, they have some basic drawing tools like that these two softwares do, Procreate and Photoshop, then you should be good to go if you're trying to paint along. But again, this video is more about like theory and fundamentals and some of the things that I'm thinking of about why I'm painting. So regardless, even if you're doing traditional art, I think there's some things to hopefully take away. That's my hope. But yeah, like I mentioned earlier with the color, I mean, I'm still learning myself. You know, I'm still trying to figure things out and see what works and what doesn't. I make plenty of mistakes whenever I'm painting. And I think that that's one of the things that is always going to be there when you're painting. You know, it's always going to be one of those things you're always trying to improve and grow. And as long as you're making strides to improve, if that's what you're going for, you know, if you want to improve your art, as long as you're trying to improve where you were yesterday, then I think that that's a success. Even if the painting doesn't look great yet, even if your work doesn't look how you want it to yet, eventually it will, if you keep on putting in the practice and the time. And so yeah, like I said, I mean, I still make plenty of mistakes, plenty of errors, and I'm still learning quite a bit. Okay, let's see, what else could I do here? I think let's get some more grass textures in here maybe. I'll use this thylacine brush again just to get some more grass right here. I know I want to have some more taller grass in here at the bottom, but I'm not sure how I want to go about that yet. Or maybe I could collapse these layers here and just smudge some of this out. No? Oh, need to collapse this one. Yeah, why not? Why not? Sometimes you just gotta try to do some things, see how it looks. And if it doesn't look good, then at least you tried it, right? But if it does, then you found something that works out. You found a new thing that works out. So don't be afraid to try little things that you may not think will look good, but just try it out. And especially if you're using digital art, there's less need to be so precious about everything, because you can undo, you can save a duplicate or a copy of your file. So yeah, don't be afraid to try new things out. That is oftentimes how you'll find some things that work that you may never thought would have, just by experimenting and making mistakes and not being afraid to make mistakes, because mistakes will help you grow. All right. I guess I think I can push back these trees even more in the background. So I'll go in front of these trees. How do I want to do this? All right, I think I'll make a selection, and I'll cut these trees off. So I'll cut and paste, and now these two trees are in different layers. So I'm going to have these here be further back. So I'm going to lighten these here. And now you can see there's like more depth. We've got this tree, and then if you go back further, you've got these trees here. All right, and then if you go back further, you've got these back here. So it just adds more depth to the scene. And I'm thinking maybe I can pull this house back and push it a little bit behind some of this front tree layer right here. Create some overlap and maybe just fill this in more a little bit. All right, so maybe lighten this house too. I think it's a little too dark now that it's back there. All right, cool. Now I will go above these layers and I'm gonna get an airbrush, sample this sky color, this light color here, and I'll just paint in some atmosphere right under these trees. And I'm below the ground layer, so it's not gonna get above the grass. And I can smudge some of that down if I need to, erase some of it out, or lower the opacity if I wanna get rid of some of it. If I do too much, maybe I'll push these trees down back here as well and make them lighter so they feel like they're even further back. All right, okay. Now, let's add a mountain in here. Create a nice shape. Earlier I mentioned this tree on this right side being kind of a framing element, this stuff here. And I thought about having some clouds up here, and I still may do that, but I think what I'll do here is get a mountain. So I'll just sample this blue color, make it a little bit lighter since we're gonna be even further back, and paint this, man, that was too light. Paint this mountain in here. I'm gonna have to adjust the colors. I'm not that happy with how this looks as of now. Let's see, let's make it a little darker, a little more saturated, a little more blue, maybe a little lighter than that. We're gonna have to adjust something, whether it be the sky or some of those trees. I may not even go with this mountain. Let's see, if I make the sky lighter, this could work. Let's make the sky lighter, and let's make the mountain lighter. Because right now you see these trees that we have back here, the values don't work. So if we turn on this grayscale, these values almost merge together, and we don't want that because these trees are much closer to us than this mountain is. We don't want them to feel like they're merging together. So let's make this mountain lighter. And now you see the tree silhouette is much more readable, but I still think I can make those trees darker and more saturated, maybe more blue. Yeah, that's better. And I think this mountain is just, it's not that bad, but maybe have it change its shape a little bit shorter. I'll get some clouds in here too. Let's do that now. Just get a light color and I'll get some stylized clouds in here. Maybe we'll add on to more of it. Well, maybe we'll add on to it more, but for now, I'll just leave that there. Let's turn down the grid, turn down the opacity of the drawing grid so I can see what's going on. All right, now you can see the water down here. I still haven't added any reflections to it, and I want to save that to the end because the reflection is going to be things that I've already painted. So if I do the reflection now, I may add more details to this tree and they won't be shown up in the reflection and it will just look a little bit off. So that's why I'm waiting for that. It's another one of those things that I'll wait until the very end to do when I know that everything is how I want it to look. Okay, now what I'll do is go back to this grass layer. I'm kind of jumping around the canvas now, but I'm at that point where I'm just getting in some details. So I'm not worrying about the overall composition and all that. I'm just trying to get in some smaller details here and there. Don't want to do too much, but I'm just zooming out, looking, seeing what still looks unfinished, what still needs work, and then I'm going to that area, zooming in and not zooming in too much, but zooming in to get some details in there. See, like what I'm doing here, this is like as far as I'll zoom in. I don't want to get like this. If you could start seeing pixels on your canvas, then I feel like that's a little too zoomed in, and you may start to lose sight of the bigger picture. And so that can definitely happen. If you get too caught up or focused on one particular detail, you may lose sight of everything else. And it's the big picture that matters, at least in my opinion. The exact details don't matter as much. And I know some people's styles may like to include a lot of details, and there's nothing wrong with that. But for me in particular, I like to have the bigger picture matter. The details don't matter as much to me. Of course, they can be fun to paint, and you may want to have details that look nice and pretty and all that, and that's understandable. But if you have a good composition that reads well, and a good, good fundamentals, good lighting, flow, shape, language, form, all of those things, then the details again don't matter as much. But again, everybody has a different way of doing things, so that's just my way, or my opinion, at least at this point in time. Especially if you want an image to communicate or to read well. Now, if you're doing more like stylized art, or if you're doing stuff that's more abstract or impressionistic, then of course, like these aren't rules or anything like that, what I'm saying here, but so it's just something that I keep in mind for the readability for my paintings, and, for storytelling and all that. Let's see what else I can do. I'm gonna get some branches in here, so I'll make a new layer above everything and get like a brown color, like this should be good. And we just want some more color onto these branches. Maybe just paint some of this in, and maybe we'll have some branches coming out the top of this tree here to indicate that it's a tree, to further illustrate that. Just want some irregularity whenever dealing with nature. A lot of times nature is irregular. We'll get some in here as well. But yeah, a lot of times nature isn't symmetrical. Like if you look at human-made objects, oftentimes they're symmetrical, straight lines, they're, perfect curves and all of that. But nature is more unpredictable. Keeping these branches a little loose and a little irregular is good, in my opinion. Maybe we'll have some coming off these bushes. I can't overdo this. I don't want to overdo it and start doing too much of that. Too many details. So trying to do just enough, but not too much. Now I'm working on some grass here. I think I like how this image reads without this mountain. Yeah, I think I'm going to take the mountain out. I just feel like I like the way that these trees silhouette with that bright sky behind them. So I'm going to remove that mountain there. But at least we tried it. We saw that it didn't really work, or at least not how I wanted it to. So no problem getting rid of it. Now on this cloud, I will get in some, let's not do this. Let's have more perspective in these clouds. I'm going to go down to this texture brush I have here. You could do like any texture brush should work. I'm just going to stamp in some texture, and I'm going to distort it to fit the perspective. And this requires some knowledge of perspective, but you can see I'm just kind of stretching it out and warping it and fitting it into perspective here. And my hope is that these will look like clouds when I'm done with this. All right, maybe something like this I think works. These clouds kind of feel like they're in perspective. Let's see. Yeah, I think I'm gonna go with something like that. Maybe this piece is kind of throwing me off right here. All right, I think that looks fine. It's just a quick way of me getting clouds in here without having to do too much. So yeah, you could do that with really any texture brush. Just find a texture that you like and distort it into perspective. And you can get creative with the shapes and kind of see what comes out of it. But I'll just go with that for now. I may change it later, but I think for now, that's fine. Let's get a character in here. I'll just place him right here for now. We can always move him. Feel free to get your own character if you're painting along. This is just an example. Just using the selection tool to get a shape. I'm going to just paint in this character, maybe walking through the grass, and they are going to be looking at this house, kind of helping with the composition. So we have this framing element here. We have these kind of this framing element here. I'm thinking we could move the character maybe into this area, but we'll do that in a moment. We have these clouds that kind of help frame as well. And we have these trees flowing down like this, right? And we have this water that's coming back, flowing down to this house. And this character, if we see the character first, since they're red, the color I'm choosing is red here for the character's cloak or their robes or whatever they're wearing. That contrasts very nicely with green. And so that will hopefully get our attention first. And once we see that character standing there, we will see, like, what are they looking at? And we'll see they're looking at this house. And these are the two main focal point elements in the scene, these two areas right there. And if I've done that successfully, then hopefully this will work out. So like I said, let's maybe try moving this character a little bit closer. I'll get some lighting hitting their right side. And on their left side, we want to get some shadow. Just a little bit of shadow there. I'm going to get some more atmosphere behind this house. So I'll just duplicate that layer, put it behind the house, because I want that house to pop out a little bit more from the trees. So maybe something like this. And we'll see, before it was like this, and now after, the house just pops out a little bit more. It's just one of those small things that you can do to make things stand out a little bit more. All right, so one of the final things I'll do here before just cleaning everything up and all that is going to be to add some lighting, some overlay lighting. And so to do that, I will go above this, I'll go above this tree layer here, these trees. So right above this and below these bushes there. And I'll set this layer to overlay, and this will work on Photoshop and Procreate. I don't know about other softwares. If they have an overlay blend mode, then they should work. And I'm just going to use an airbrush, and I will get a warmer color here, a very light, warm color like this. And I'll just paint in some lighting here. So I'm just softly painting this in along some of the areas that I want to have pop out more. And then we can get some more of an orange color for the areas where there's going to be some bounce light. So light bounces, right? So if light hits grass, it will actually bounce up into some of these underplanes of the shadow right here. So we can kind of fill some of that in with some like an orange or a green glow, and that will make it feel more vibrant. I'll make a new one of these overlay layers. You could probably just have done this on one layer, but I want this above everything. So I want to get some color into these shadow areas of these bushes, maybe under this tree a little bit here, onto this grass. Don't want to do too much of this, because if I start to do too much, you'll see that it starts to look like a filter and it just looks unrealistic, and we don't want that. So just a little bit of this along this grass here. And maybe in the foreground right here as well. But yeah, it just helps create a nice soft glow. It's one of those things that I won't do until the very end for the most part, when I know that everything looks good and pretty much how I want it to be. And I'm definitely going to clean up some things. Like this tree still needs some work. I'm going to clean that up. But right now, I think it's safe to get this lighting in. I'm going to turn that lighting off for now. It's still there. It's just I've turned the layers off so I can see what I'm doing and not have that lighting be affecting my paint in any way. And I want to continue to add to this area here, this foreground area. Let me just continue to build up this grass here. But these are all minor details, so I'll probably speed up the video here in a moment just to work on some minor details, and then I'll be back to do the reflection at the end. All right, so here we are, and I think things are brought up and detailed enough to bring in the reflection now. Of course, we may make some more adjustments after that, but they'll be minor enough to where I don't think they'll matter. I don't think they'll mess up the reflection. So what I'm going to do is just duplicate the layers that I want reflected. So for example, these bushes, and I'm going to bring them down, set it to a clipping mask on the water layer, and I'll just vertical flip these and have them like that so that they show up in the water. Let me do that again just for these bushes in the front right here. And I may need to erase some of this. Since I did that on one layer, it's going to be a little harder for me to do this, but still going to be manageable. I just have to do a little adjusting. All right, like that should be good. And I'll just do the same right here. I'm just copying the canvas, trying to match up these parts that should be reflected. It's a little weird again because of how I made these layers, and I will just erase some of that out to match it up. All right, and so once we have this reflected layer looking good, I'm gonna go above it on a new clipping mask layer here, and I'm just gonna get in some selections to maybe get some movement along the water, pretty much just along the edges or the where the land meets the water, and get these lighter. You'll see what I'm trying to do here. See, let's invert that, and I'm going to softly paint in with some white here. And we can refine that shape if needed. We just want it to be just along the edges, just along the shore where the water meets the land. Just like some movement in the water, like I said, that's all this is. All right, one more thing for this reflection. The reflected elements right here, I'm just gonna select that, go to motion blur, and just pull it down to make it feel like it's more, has more movement to it, like it's an actual reflection. And then what I'll do is lower the opacity here so it's not as strong. And now it feels more like water. And I'll clean up the edges of these bushes and all that. Let's see where I can clean up some of the bottoms here. But for the most part, this is about it. So I'll go in and I'll refine some more things, clean up the grass, maybe clean up some of this, like right here, this kind of tangent happening right here, clean that up. Minor things like that, maybe fix the values of these birds, little things like maybe adjust the house a little bit, move the character. But I'll speed that part up if you want to watch the rest of it and see what I do. But for the most part, like I said, this is about good. So I appreciate your time. Thank you for watching. I hope this video was helpful and that you were able to learn something from it. And I'll see you in the next video. So stay creative.